Meanwhile, Russia and Turkey are strongly denouncing the U.S.-led plans the U.S. plans to station militants along Syria's international borders. Russia has described the U.S. move as provocative and unilateral, which is aimed at regime change.
The announcement that this zone will be controlled by U.S.-backed groups by a force of up to 3,000 people, this is a very serious issue which causes concerns that a course was set for the partition of Syria.
Now the United States has confessed that they're forming a terror army along our border. What we have to do is to strangle this terror army on our borders before it is born.
Erdogan said the U.S. is going ahead with the plan despite Ankara repeatedly objecting and warning Washington against the move. The U.S. says that it is planning to set up a 30,000-strong border force inside of Syria to protect territory held by militants that the White House has supported. The force will operate along Syria's borders with Turkey and Iraq. The announcement comes as Damascus and its allies have dealt a crushing blow to terrorists across the country. Let's see what Marcus Papadopoulos thinks. He is a publisher and editor at Politics First, joining us from London. Well, you heard the news. What is your reaction, Marcus Papadopoulos?
This is a significant piece of evidence to corroborate what many of us have been saying for some time now, that the Americans, having failed to overthrow the Syrian government, are now reverting to Plan B. And Plan B is to partition Syria so that the Americans and their regional allies retain presence in the country once the conflict is over there. Now, it is completely illegal. What the Americans are attempting to do has no standing under international law whatsoever. Do I believe, however, the Americans will be successful in their attempts to partition Syria? No, I don't, and I say that for a number of reasons. The Syrian government, the Russian government, and the Iranian government are absolutely resolute in their determination to ensure that every inch of Syrian territory is liberated and comes back under the jurisdiction of the Syrian government. Also, much of the territory that the Kurds are presently controlling in Syria is completely disproportionate to their numbers in the country. Much of the territory is not actually inhabited by Kurds, so that will be territory which the Kurds will struggle to control. I would also make this point: who really are the brains behind these plans to partition Syria? Is it the Americans, or perhaps it's the British? The British are very active in Syria in attempting to overthrow the Syrian government, especially in their support to the White Helmets. But also, the British are past masters of partition. They brought about partition in Ireland, they brought about partition in India, they brought about partition in Cyprus, and I suspect it's the British who are advising the Americans on how to bring about partition in Syria.
It seems like you are adamant in your statement there about the partition factor. The U.S. seems to be very ambitious about the number that it has announced, 30,000. But both require a lot of effort. I think that it was back in July where the U.S., through this training program that they had, which they had high ambitions for, $500 million was the figure that was released, of which I'm not too sure how many they ended up training. I think it was in the single digits. And they're talking about 30,000 now. I mean, do you think that's kind of ambitious and even realistic?
I sense it's unrealistic. I believe the Americans will probably have more luck in recruiting Kurds for what they want to do, but I don't believe they will be anywhere near able to achieve the number they are setting themselves. And against that is the fact that the Syrian military, supported by the Russian military and the Iranian military, is on the advance in the north of Syria. They are making great gains in the northwest against the Islamist Wahhabist terrorists there, the Free Syrian Army, al-Nusra, etc., etc. And sooner or later, the Kurds will have to make a decision. Do they really want to take on the combined Syrian military, Russian military, and Iranian military on the battlefield? I think not. And I would also urge people to be very cautious about what Erdogan says. What Erdogan is saying to the Americans in public is very different to what he's saying in private. Turkey under Erdogan will remain a steadfast, ardent supporter of America. The Americans and the Turks benefit tremendously because of their strategic relationship. And I do not believe that there will be a full-blown conflict between the Turkish military and the American-backed Kurds in Syria. That will not happen. Some people are saying that Turkey's relationship with America could come to an end. Well, quite frankly, they're very ignorant people. On Turkish territory, the Americans have nuclear warheads, and also Turkey is allowed to illegally occupy a third of Cyprus, is allowed to have its soldiers illegally in northern Syria, and of course the Turks cross into northern Iraq when it suits them, and they get away with that. Why do the Turks get away with that in Cyprus, in Syria and Iraq? Because of their strategic relationship with America. It is one of the strongest strategic relationships in the world between Ankara and Washington.
Thank you for that. It's a pleasure. Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor at Politics First.